Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Pfeffer, the managing editor of Dice News, and we're here with a special panel today where we're going to talk about helping the recruiter connect the dots, translating what you do into what they need. Basically, we're going to focus on helping you figure out how to demonstrate that the skills you have translate into the job that may, on paper, not look like you're quite the right fit. I'm going to introduce our moderator today, John Sumser, who's the editor of HR Examiner. He's going to be leading the discussion. And John, why don't you take it away?
Hey, thanks, Mark. It's good to be here. So I'm just going to start by walking through and having everybody introduce themselves. Don?
Dawn Rasmussen, Pathfinder Writing and Career Services based in Portland, Oregon.
Beautiful Portland. John?
John Estes, Robert Half, Director of Training for the U.S. I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Tulsa, beautiful Tulsa. It's cold there and warm in Houston. Are you going to go home?
They let me go home on Thursday.
Back to the snow. Justin, how are you?
I'm great, thanks. My name's Justin Hall. I produce and edit something on YouTube called The Justin Hall Show. In a past career life, I was a recruiter at a technology firm, and I also ran my own small startup.
Okay, nice to have you all here. So again, as Mark said, the question is, what do you do when the recruiter doesn't understand that you're a fit for the job? And that's got a variety of branches to the tree. So let's start with Dawn and just take us a little bit through the candidate's part in this process. And I think maybe you have some interesting ideas about assessing whether or not you should be applying in the first place.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think that, one of the surefire things is that you really should have that honest conversation with yourself at first to say, do I really qualify for this job? And, I think I read somewhere at the Wall Street Journal had some statistic. You have to be at least 90% qualified. I don't know if that's necessarily true. Most employers, when they put together a job order, they're asking for everything in the moon. So, of course, they're going to ask for everything that they can. But you really have to say, do I really qualify for this job? Am I mostly, most of the way there? And so when you get to a point in a candidate, it's nothing more frustrating to hit a recruiter who doesn't quite understand what the job entails, but you have that expertise. And so one thing I suggest is you could possibly disarm the recruiter and really kind of let them know you're on their side. So instead of trying to assert your knowledge and expertise and make them feel small, you can help build them up and basically say, I know it's really tough trying to fill all the different jobs, and you're also you're trying to find the right person for these jobs and trying to understand all these different aspects. Let me provide some insights on what this job might entail that you might not be aware of, or something like that. So you're trying to say, I understand your pain and here's how I can help. And that might help overcome some of the disconnect, basically, that might be happening.
So I just want to push that a little bit further. It seems to me that the business of being qualified for a job is often really dependent on the size of the company that you're going to. The bigger the company, the more precise the job description. And the smaller the company, the more what matters is how you fit in and how willing you are to explode around the size of the thing. So some of this question is actually not, are you qualified, but how far are you willing to go outside of the bounds of your qualifications? So the candidate it's a double-edged sword, right?
It is. And so, you do have to have a pretty good understanding what the quality fit is, and the fit of the culture. And so making a case to say, here's how I connect to this company culture based on what you're telling me. And I also say that you can also try to correlate. Sometimes we don't have the precise skill that the company is asking for. So if it's a similar skill set, you can help draw the parallel. Sometimes the recruiter doesn't necessarily do that. If you're asking for X skill and I have Y, and they're fairly similar, so it'd be an easy thing to pick up if you're missing that skill set, or at least try to draw that parallel that they do connect to a certain degree, that isn't really an issue. It's more about the culture fit.
Got it. So, John, do you think that candidates generally prepare themselves in this way for jobs when they're thinking about applying for them? Is this what you find?
I think it's a mixed bag. It's across the board. I mean, I think some people they're very specific about what they want, and they do that preparation. And I think some people just see a keyword on an ad and they say, "Hey, I think I may take a crack at that." So I mean, it's all over the place.
So do you think if I look hard at the job and make up my mind, is it really going to matter if I'm one of 10,000 records in a database applying for the job?
You mean as far as how you're going to stand out in that kind of a crowd, or?
I'm just at the level of deciding to apply. Does it make sense to invest energy in thinking about whether or not you fit in a job when there's 10,000 other people in the same application pile?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're talking about those kind of numbers, I mean, I would think anyway, you need to be very, very focused and very driven as to, why you want this position, why you're a good fit, that kind of thing. You're not just going to throw in your resume in the hat, so to speak, and just, hope for the best. So there's got to be a lot of homework, a lot of preparation, that kind of thing.
Got it. It's funny because a lot of recruiters use spam tactics to go out and find it. It's a fairly common thing in recruiting that you just hit a big list and see what comes up. And my guess is that that's not a terrible way to apply for jobs. Justin, you've got the sort of outside coming in perspective on this. When you imagine that you're a contractor coming in from the cold, so to speak, how do you figure out whether or not to apply for a job with a certain place?
I think I'm almost 40 years old, so for me, I look at the years I have ahead, and they make me think that the next job I get, I really want to care about that company. So it means I have a research phase. And what John was talking about earlier, some people are just throwing their hats in the ring because they see a keyword, whereas some people are going to make a calculated approach for a company that really matches their passions and their interests. And I was on the other side of the table hiring someone a few years back, and this person came in and they knew more about my company than I did. And it told me that they were really passionate about that opportunity. And so they didn't have exactly the skill set, but the fact that they had invested time in advance to really understand the company, to really understand our market, to really understand our position in the market meant that I thought, okay, this person is already coming in with a literacy about our company that compensates for the fact that they may not have the exact skill set. And furthermore, it shows that they're not just tossing their hat in the ring all over the place. They've really decided to focus in on a job here. So I think for a person who decides to come in with a non-traditional resume, if they have a target company and they're able to do a lot of research and really feel that research, that it matches their passions, they can present an impressive candidacy.
That's great. So I'm going to jump straight to the topic, Justin, and that is, you get in, it's most likely to happen with a non-traditional resume. You get into the interview and you're talking to the recruiter, and maybe you're thinking to yourself, what a moron, or maybe you're thinking, I really want this job and this guy isn't getting it, or something. But you're in the position where you know you can do the job, you know that your qualifications match, but the recruiter isn't seeing it. What do you do?
Wow. That's a great question. I mean, I think at the beginning of the talk, Dawn mentioned sort of siding with the recruiter, and I think that could be a moment for radical honesty and just say, look, I think, you seem to be asking me a lot about things I don't have on my resume. I would really love to focus on the things I do have on my resume. Yes, I'm a non-traditional candidate, but I thought this was and I think this is an innovative company that can use someone like me. But just, putting your chips on the table and not, because they're asking you to dance a certain tune and you're bringing a different piece of music. So you need to be, I think you can't be anything other than honest about that on some level.
So John, what do you think about that? You're a candidate, you get in front of the recruiter, and it's clear there's a communication screw up of some kind. What do you do?
Yeah. Well, gosh, there's so many different roads we can go down. I know, going back to what Dawn said earlier, this whole idea of the the position, people have a complete laundry list of what they say they want, and it may or may not really be all that accurate. I think, again, you do talk with that recruiter. I think we get I think applicants get way too bogged down, and frankly, recruiters get way too bogged down as well on the technology, on what I call the alphabet soup. Oh, they don't have this. Oh, they don't have this. Well, companies aren't hiring people for their alphabet soup and the letters they have by their name and all that. They're hiring them for specific skills, yes, but they're trying to solve business problems. And so you go back to that recruiter and talk about the company and the business that company is trying to conduct. And what do they actually want accomplished? The recruiter that may not understand some of the technology might have a better idea of what the company needs and what the company wants and how that individual, that technologist can better fit and match into that organization. Now, here's the other thing. That individual may need to tailor their resume for that specific situation, because, again, the reality is these resumes get passed around and they don't get as much, what I call eyeball time as people think. They get dismissed very quickly. So there may be a little bit of work to do on the applicant to go back and tailor that resume for that specific position, showing more, like we talked about earlier, specific accomplishments and what they can do and the ROI that they can provide versus what they don't have. I know that's going down a few different roads there, but just some thoughts.
Okay, well that's a good start. We're gonna keep kicking this particular dead horse for a while. So we'll go down some of the roads that you said. Don, what do you think?
Well, I think we hire people we like, and that's really what it boils down to. And Nordstrom has a really good mantra. I don't know if you've heard it, but basically it's hire for personality and train for skill. Right. And so, that it boils down to, some of the skill stuff, unless it's something that there is absolutely zero learning curve, then obviously you need to be able to know your stuff. But usually there's a learning curve in every company. So it's really, can you solve the problems like what John said? So I think if a candidate can really focus on asking the recruiter, it's like, tell me what this, what are the problems this position is trying to solve? And that shows that different, unique aspect. Most people are so bent on, here are all my skill sets. Here's this, this, and this, and this. That's kind of ramming it down their throat. But really, what can you do with them is really what what really matters to the recruiter who's going to be presenting this candidate. So understanding what is it that the pain points are, and then talking about how you're going to solve them, and can really build that connectivity. And if there's an education gap with the recruiter in terms of what they're not understanding the technical part, maybe that's where you can say, here's how we can overcome that. I don't know. Here's how I can help solve those problems as it relates to that technology. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of going down a different road too, but it could really make a difference when you start working on solving the problem and talking about how you can differentiate yourself based on your personality and ability to pick things up and solve those problems.
So that's what you do in the interview. I want to back up a little bit in the process, and I'm a candidate. I'm applying for a job. I'm competent at what I do. But I don't want a lateral promotion. I want the next job, and I want to learn something on the job, and I want to be challenged, which is high motivation in the technical arena. If I want to be challenged, it means I'm unqualified for the job, right?
And most employers are going to take the tactic like, that's not my problem. I need X. So I don't care if you want to be challenged. I need you to fill this hole that I have in my company. So that's kind of hard-nosed approach, but that's a lot of how people are perceiving that. The employers are perceiving that. So give me what I need to fix my problems.
I wonder if that's true in the technical fields. I keep hearing about labor shortages and STEM shortages in the technical fields, and so I think that may be true in retail. That may be true in lots of kinds of work, but in the area that we're looking at, which is, I'm a technical guy, mm-hmm. And I thrive on challenge. I'm an engineer. I thrive on challenge. Thriving on challenge means I don't want to work on stuff that I know how to do. I don't want a job as a robot. I want a job where I have to think hard. So I want to be challenged. And I need to persuade you, the recruiter, somehow that I have the capacity to learn my way into the job because that's what my career is about. How do I do that on the resume so that I get the interview and don't get bounced out for just the reasons you described?
Well, I think you need to give specific examples, and that's one of the biggest problems with resumes today is a lot of people just copy and paste a job description, which really doesn't help anybody. It doesn't answer the question of, so what? What did you do with it? So it's going to be really important not only just for the interview, but also in advance of that, in the resume, you need to tell stories, and that's what people remember that put those skill sets or that problem-solving acumen into action by giving demonstrable results. Here's how I helped. Here's me putting these skills into action and achieved X, and that will get attention. Absolutely.
Have you seen that series of books that has 3-sentence love stories?
No.
They're great. But that's kind of what you're talking about is encapsulating a career in 2 or 3 sentences as a line in a resume. And getting this across, that's a remarkable thing to be able to do.
It's tough, but again, we remember the stories. We don't remember job duties. So I always tell people when you're writing a resume, write from the gut. Think about how did you solve these things. Don't get bogged down in the technical part. Let's talk about what did you actually do.
Got it. So Justin, now here's the scenario. You're a genius programmer coming in from being an independent contractor for 15 years, and you want to go to work somewhere, but you want to be challenged. You don't want to be doing the run-of-the-mill thing. So your resume isn't going to match the job, even if it was a clean resume. How do you get on the radar of the recruiter in the first place, and then what do you do to persuade them that you learn fast enough to do the job?
Well, I think I just heard you say I'm a programmer, and I think that's good enough. I mean, if you show up and you can program, there's so many companies, there's such a shortage of engineers that you're in a pretty good spot. And it might be good to remember that if you're a technical candidate with years of experience, you do have some cards, so you should feel some confidence there. But I think it's a lot of what Dawn was saying, which is if you've been in the wild for 15 years, you've done projects for clients or you've done projects for yourself that maybe can be described in a good story. And the story is, what problem was I trying to solve for myself? What problem was I trying to solve for someone else? I mean, as a person who is looking for engineers and hiring someone who hadn't been in a company setting, I would really want to be sure that you're a good listener. And then you're not someone who went off alone because you can't stand to be around people. And even if that's true, you want to make it clear that you're coming back now because you really do want to be around people and you really want to be a part of a team. And I think that's the interesting thing is, if you're an engineer, there's a lot of places that need engineers. The thing you're going to have to prove is that you're ready to, yes, you want to be challenged, but you're ready to take direction from someone else and you're ready to be a part of collaboration, and that I think is the struggle for someone who's been an independent lone wolf for a long time.
Got it. That's great. So John, you got this gap in your resume. You want to be challenged by the job. How do you get seen? How do you surface in the resume database, even if you've got a great story, if you don't have the bits and pieces in the resume?
Well, now, are we talking about gaps? Or are we talking about, not everything? When you say gap, do you mean between positions, or do you mean gap in skill set?
So I'll give you a clear example, and there are thousands of these in the technical world, but a clear example is you don't know Erlang, which is the programming language that WhatsApp is built on, but you do know garbage collecting, non-directory using software from telecommunications things. So you've got the basic raw meat for the hamburger. You just don't have the hamburger, and you got to explain that somehow. And what you want is to learn the next thing because that's what great technical people do. So how do you get seen? In a system that surfaces resumes with keyword searches.
Yeah. Well, again, I think it's been said, but to me, it all goes back to ROI. There's always a place for a technology person that's had an impact on ROI. So in some way, if their previous company or their previous contract, did they somehow have an impact on revenues, expenses, or did they somehow have an impact on operational efficiencies? And people want to talk that language. And if that's communicated on a resume, that's going to stand out more than just about anything. Whether there's an opening or not. Now, there's no guarantee, and there's no guarantee in any of this. But if you're talking about raising your batting average as far as being seen, that's probably going to have more of an impact than anything. Again, unless it's just such a skill that stands out so much in the market. I mean, again, you're a C# developer with 5+ years of production, and you're available. I mean, that's there's probably not going to be a whole lot of explanation needed, right? But if it's, some other skills, again, as much as you can talk about ROI, the more that's going to stand out. There's no guarantee in any of this, but that's going to be much more impactful than just kind of going through, as Dawn said, here I did this, I did this, I did this for ABC company and XYZ company. So again, the accomplishment is everything.
And I was going to interject something too, that, one thing that I coach my clients on is if you are looking at job descriptions out there, maybe, a recruiter throws a couple your way and that kind of thing. And if you're constantly seeing a skill set that you do not possess, don't let that be a barrier. That's where we need to go hit it head on. And that's part of career management strategy is to go get it. Don't keep eluding it, but go get it. And then it's not even an issue anymore. You've solved that.
What do you mean go get it?
Go take a class, go, find an opportunity to learn it. If someone will be your mentor or train you, if there's an opportunity to volunteer and put it into action. I had one client who was a technical person, and he was missing that one skill set, and he went out and actually created a website that used that language. I can't remember which one it was specifically, but he actually put it into action. So we had a demonstrable project that put that skill into action once he was was a self-learner. He initiated his own self-learning.
Yeah, and there's so many open source software projects on the web. So if you want to learn a language, there's a community that's looking for volunteers and wants people to help.
Got it.
Well, John, I was going to say too, the bigger picture there is, especially with any IT person, is it reinforces the idea of lifelong learning. Mm-hmm. Anybody knows that whatever is hot today is not going to be hot tomorrow. There's always going to be something new. And companies want to hire those people that just have that hunger to know leading edge technology. They've got that discipline to always learn more, always be looking at the next best thing kind of thing. So people, they want to hire those type of individuals.
And I do tell my clients too, just, there's 3 things: professional development. Employers are hiring subject matter experts, or at least the best one that they can hire. And so do you have any skill gaps? Number 1, are there any skills you need to update? And the third piece is the thought leadership. What are you learning about the cutting edge stuff that's coming down the pipeline that could impact your industry? That way you can bring that stuff back to the company and help them grow and evolve.
So one of the things you have to do in this process is translate your skill set into the environment that you're trying to enter, right? That's the big part of this problem. That's an acute problem for people in the military who are making technical transitions, but it's a problem for everybody who makes a technical transition. That language is different. That understandings are different, and so you want to be able to prove that you fit into the next thing. What I want to explore next is what's the difference between translating your skills into the new setting and lying, right? It's not a simple yes or no there, but being able to say, I can do X in your setting may not show up in your literal history anywhere, so that if somebody were to do a LinkedIn search against all the junk that you've done in your past, they may not see what you just claimed you could do, even though it's accurate, even though it's a good translation. What do? Where's the line between translating your experience so that somebody else could understand it and fibbing? Justin, what do you think?
I think that's a great question, and my first impulse is to say optimism and intention. Are you serious? And I guess, can you back up the optimism with a resume that shows you took on things you couldn't do before, learned how to do them, and did them? But are you serious? Because if your motivation is I really need a job, there's a kind of desperation there that's true to you, but doesn't necessarily match the employer's goal of getting some group work done. And if you're pitching yourself into that and your motivation is about desperation for a job and not necessarily eagerness to work for that company or eagerness to learn that new skill set, that's a challenging motivation. I think this is a severe intangible I'm talking about, but it's really, are you a person who's motivated to, for the right reasons? And that's almost like a moral question.
Okay. John, what do you think?
Me? Well, I always tell clients that you should never, ever, ever lie. And you should never, at the end of the day, if they decide to hire you and you're sitting in front of your desk and you think, I have no idea where to start, you're in trouble. And so you should always make sure that, there's that fine line and a tacit understanding of what you're capable of doing and what you can do and what you can't do. And so you really should have clarity in that and have that honest conversation with the recruiter so you're not overstepping your bounds.
So let me just push that back a little bit. I have a degree from a school in a discipline called applied behavioral science. And when I say applied behavioral science, nobody knows what the hell I'm talking about. So if I say organizational development, people light up. Right, so that's the translation from point A to point B. If I tell you that I have a degree in organizational development, that's not factually accurate. But if I want my resume understood, I need to make that move. And so I risk I see statistics like 70% of resumes contain misrepresentations. I think that's where the resumes have misrepresentations. If you want to translate your capacities into something that other people can understand, you have to use different language than the language that you were assigned when you got the experience. Right? And so the question is, how do you make that choice? And John, why don't you tackle that?
Well, in that scenario that you just gave, to me, that's no big deal. I mean, on resumes, people are really, let's use the word embellishing quite a bit, right? Saying they've got 5 years experience in X, and really what they have is a little bit on their home network of going around this, right? Nothing in production. What you're talking about there, to me, can be easily explained, and I would be fine as a recruiter if you had, your degree, and then, again, maybe in parentheses, organizational development or something. To me, that's no big deal.
Okay,
I do echo what Dawn said. I mean, there's really, there's just for this. I mean, lying is, for two reasons. One, obviously, lying is never the right thing to do. But two, again, even if you quote lied your way into the organization, then you're going to get there. They're going to realize you're not a match. You're not going to be long there. It's going to be a disaster. So, it's for both reasons. Just stick to what you know. Be transparent. Be upfront. Again, as what was said earlier, don't focus on what you don't have. Do focus on what you do have and what you do bring. And that should be enough. There's don't embellish the resume. Just no good comes out of that.
Huh. What do you think, Don?
I think you need to be honest in your resume, and I think you do need to understand what part of your background translates clearly. And there is one little trick I tell people. It's not really a trick, but it's a way to help build that translation. For example, John, you said something about that you had applied behavior. Is that right?
Well, applied behavioral science.
Okay, so you could list what the actual title of your degree name is and put in parenthesis following that, equivalent to organizational management, unparenthesis. So you are spelling it out, but you're also providing that linking, and the link back to what what you really meant and what it really truly is, if that's true. And the same thing happens a lot with job titles. And as we all know, companies have really goofy job titles at times, and they're not really accurate representations. You still have to list the actual job title you possess, but at the same time, if it's equivalent to help draw that parallel, then you can put that in parentheses. So as long as it's honest, you can't ever fib. Never.
But let's remember that resumes are personal marketing, and so much of life is an experiment. And when you put yourself out there, we're all faking it until we make it. We don't know how to do what we do. We get up and figure it out in collaboration with other humans. So the important thing, I think, to build on what Dawn was saying, is you don't want to exaggerate or, as John said, embellish so far that you no longer can, with confidence, believe what you said on your resume, and that if someone asks too many questions, it falls apart. But you can market yourself. I mean, that's what you're doing by putting yourself out there for a job.
Got it. So I got a little bit of a shaggy dog story. It'll take a second, and it leads to a good question. So one of my favorite career stories is the Steven Spielberg career story. And what Steven Spielberg did to get started in the movie industry is he broke into the offices at Universal and found an empty office, set up a desk, got a phone, and started wandering around asking people if he could help. He did this for about a year. He had saved up enough money so that he could do this for about a year. And at the end of the year, he was working for a director who said, I really want to work with you on the next project. And he said, well, then somebody'd have to hire me. And that's how Spielberg got his gig. He did not go ask somebody to take him on. He broke in. He stole resources inside of the company, and he found his way into the job, which I think is exactly the kind of person that I'm generally trying to hire in my company. Somebody who will break rules in order to get things done because the rules get in the way of getting things done. So the question is, in the process of applying for a job, how do you do that? How do you get in? They wouldn't hire him. Right? They wouldn't hire him. They wouldn't entertain a conversation with him because he was a recent graduate of a film school, and they didn't hire those people. He knew he could do the job, and so he went and made it happen. That happens all the time in technical disciplines. What do you do? God, I love your faces, John. This is good. That's a lovely thing about video. So what do you think, John?
Well, I was making a face because someone came in. I'm in someone's office, and they're wanting to know how much longer I'm going to be sitting at their desk, right? So I was like, well, hey,
got it.
Till it's over, right?
I thought it was commentary on the question.
No, there's all kind of great stories about, how someone got a particular job. I just read the book David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell, and there's all kind of great stories in there about the little guy that ended up getting the big job. But again, going back to what Dawn said, what I said before, I think you just be honest. Be yourself. Certainly, this is marketing, so you do have to sell yourself, and you do have to stand out. Absolutely, and that's what marketing is, right? What makes you different than someone else with similar backgrounds. And I know people have done a variety of things, whether it's a letter campaign or whatever it is, to be somewhat memorable. We could stay here all day and talk about different approaches. I just don't want to be memorable by being dishonest. So I guess that's where I come in.
Got it, Don?
Well, I was thinking about that, and I think that anytime you try an unconventional approach, it can backfire on you, and you have to know your audience, and you also have to be gutsy enough to be willing to deal with the consequences of that backfiring. Certainly that does get people's attention, but one thing I want to point out is for every person that has a great story that you've heard about, that they did XYZ and they got a job, there's maybe they've had a lot of failures before that. or, you know, we don't hear a whole lot about the spectacular failures. We kind of shake our heads and say, boy, that guy's crazy. I don't think we want to hire him. So, you know, it's a risk. It's a calculated risk. And I think you have to, if you're going to take it, you have to stand with it and follow it all the way through. And I think what Steven Spielberg did was pretty gutsy, and he played it all the way out to the very end. And at that last moment when he says, I need someone to hire me, he put it all on the table there. And so he could have been turned down right then, and the cops could have been called. I mean, it's a calculated risk taking, I think.
Got it. That's a great answer. Justin?
Well, I was going to say, I think there's great opportunities for unconventional insinuation into a company now because of social networks. I mean, you can hop on LinkedIn, you can hop on Facebook, you can triangulate yourself to people, especially for a big company. You're going to know people who work there, or you might know people who work there, or you might be able to just find Google history on people who work there, which then allows you to sort of like find the sports teams you have in common, or figure out which Starbucks they all go to every Monday morning for their team meetings. You could look up Instagram photos that people tag from within the office and figure out when their happy hour is and go hang out near the bathroom because people need to use the bathroom when there's a happy hour. I mean, there's all sorts of unprecedented stalking strategies that you can use leveraging social networks. And it does get back to some of those fundamentals. You want to be confident without being creepy. You want to have your resume ready, but you don't want to be sort of thrusting it in every bag that goes by. And you want to, I think if you can find a way to show that you're working already, and I think that's what Steven Spielberg did in your story, John, that's inspiring, is Steven Spielberg basically said, I'm already doing this work. So what projects, does the company have any public initiatives? Does the company have any stated goals in public? Does it have any open source repositories? Can you look at the technology or the efforts that the company has underway in public and sort of build your own little extension of that, or your own little version of that, or your own version of the project to show that you already have a portfolio of directly relevant work? Again, for someone who's coming in who doesn't have a recent corporate job experience, or who doesn't have like the resume that fits the template exactly, showing that you can take initiative, pay attention, and be a little bit in their business, you know, shows that you're already willing to work. And I think there were people that we hired at the company where I worked where they just kept coming back, and they kept being so passionate about the company, and they kept having direct knowledge and direct sort of experiments in our areas of expertise that meant that we knew that, yes, they were a little insistent, but they were friendly and they weren't creepy, and they were really focused on us as an opportunity.
So you're talking a lot about approaches that sidestep the traditional hiring process. Send in a resume, service in the funnel, get interviewed. I don't imagine that that's a way you want to do your job search 100% of the time, but I also imagine that almost everybody could use a little bit of a non-traditional component in their portfolio of job hunting. How would you strike that balance, Jason? Justin?
Well, I think that you want to, I mean, it's really like what earlier we were talking about. How do you fill the gaps in your resume? If you can go out and, you know, join team projects to show that you're a team player, or take on a new technology to show that you've got an appetite for innovation. Or, you know, if you know that your career search is underway and you have months ahead of you, that means you have months when you can be plugging those gaps in parallel to your job search. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to balance out your weak spots, or take on projects or challenges that match exactly what you think that company might be looking for that you don't yet have. It does depend on you knowing what opportunities you're chasing. And so if you only have the vaguest sense that you want a job, it's going to be hard for you to schedule your time. You've got to find those brands or companies or groups of people that you admire and want to work with.
Got it. So John, doing unconventional job application processes is an end run around the recruiter. What's the risk when you do that? When you end run the recruiter?
Well, I guess it would depend on the scenario. I mean, again, if the recruiter is working on a specific position for XYZ company for you, and you just know that XYZ company just in general is the right company for you. Again, I just think honesty is the best policy. Just say, you know what, I'm interested in this position, but everything I've read about this company, there's a lot of hiring going on. There's a lot of growth going on. I want to work for this company. So I'm going to be talking to other, hiring managers. I'll apply for other positions, that kind of thing. I want with this company. So I just want to give you a heads up that my name may be circulated around, right? Again, we talked about non-conventional approaches. I mean, if I'm looking for a SharePoint position, and I find out from LinkedIn that one of the hiring managers is president of the local SharePoint user group, guess where I'm going next month? The SharePoint user group, right? So I mean, and I think it's okay to say that. I mean, it's okay to tell the recruiter that. Any recruiter that would get upset about that, I don't know. I'm not really sure where they're coming from. I think again, as was said earlier, persistence will get you further than any trick or any special move or whatever. And you just got to get noticed, and persistence will take you further than just about anything.
Got it. So Don, how much unconventional approach do you put into a job hunt strategy?
I'd say as much as possible. I mean, really, I think the last statistic I heard was 80% of all jobs are found through someone you know. So that's, and in fact, it was kind of interesting just on LinkedIn today on the Pulse. Lou Adler had a really great post about 12 ways to get an interview for a job. And it's basically talking a lot about those unconventional approaches. And so basically, it's the back door. It's really the relationships you build and the connections you make. And you have to pull out all the stops for yourself. This is about marketing yourself. And like what John just said about, if you're going to go to the local SharePoint users group, then that's absolutely in your best interest. The recruiter is not working for the candidate. They are working for the company that hired them, or if they're embedded in the company. It's really important that you as the candidate are your own advocate. And so that means pulling all those strings and making yourself, as present as possible in all the different arenas so that you can have those opportunities to connect and the unconventional conversations.
Got it. So I'm gonna drive this back around to where we started. You are sitting in an interview, you're talking to a recruiter, you belong in the job, and it's clear that the recruiter isn't getting that. What are the 2 or 3 things that you got to do to make that interview work, Don?
Well, I think again, I like the approach of disarming them and saying, it sounds like this company needs X, Y, Z, and here's how I can help. If you can try to draw the parallels, and then talk about, a lot of times candidates need to be picking up on cues from the recruiter about whatever they've done, about anything that they can get cues on the culture of the company, and start drawing parallels between your background and how you connect to that culture, and just trying to connect with the recruiter. And again, trying to educate them in a polite way, but not a condescending way. I think that's the best approach you can take.
So should you prepare for that eventuality? I mean, being able to do what you just said on the fly in an interview is pretty hard if you're like most people who are out looking for jobs and nervous and wanting to impress. Being able to think quickly on your feet and do the things that you said, do the spin that you said. How do you get good enough to do that?
Practice.
Yeah.
Practice. It's flexing your interviewing muscle.
What does practice look like? Do you get your dad to interview you?
It could be any form where, I always say no matter what, there's no such thing as a bad interview as long as you learn from it. I think that's the key piece. You should always be thinking about, when you're done with any interview that you have, you should do what I call an autopsy. What did I do well? What did I do wrong? What could have I done better? I know myself personally, I've had in my past, there's, as soon as I walked out, it's kind of like I smacked my head and said I could have had a V8. I totally forgot something that was really important. And so, it's really a lot of experience, but It's practicing through reviewing potential questions, understanding the value that you offer. And so when you're developing your resume, that's the best place to really start talking about and developing those stories you want to discuss in interviews. So it's really about connecting what you offer to what the employer needs.
Got it. So, John, same question. You are sitting with the recruiter, you know you belong there, and it's clear from her body language that she just isn't getting the story. What do you do?
Yeah. I mean, you've got to make it simple. Everybody should have their elevator pitch, right? And it should be very concise. Here's what I can do, right? Here's what I want, and here's why this company would benefit by me being on board. I mean, just break it down that simply. And it should be, everybody should have this, right? It should be in a at least bringing to the table who you are and what you can do and what you have done. We call that an elevator pitch. Everybody should have that. How do you get there? Well, as Dawn said, practice, practice, practice. Right? Don't wing this. This should be something that's very well thought out and prepared, and something that you've rehearsed. Again, not something that's made up, right? I mean, it should be something very tangible, very specific. No one wants to hire anyone that talks in abstract terms. Right? Talk as specific as possible about who you are, what you want, and what you've done, and what you can bring to the table. Why this company would benefit by you being there.
Got it. So Justin, you're about to clobber the recruiter and say, "You idiot."
I'm a non-violent guy, and John, I appreciate what you just said about having your elevator pitch, and I absolutely agree it's important to have a story of who you are. But for the scenario that you're proposing, John Sumser, the challenge is, I think that might actually be a listening moment. And I think that might be when you are putting yourself out there and the person across the table is sort of like checking their phone and beginning to sort of like ask more combative questions or asking about things that you've already covered that you clearly don't have. I think that might be a moment to turn it around and to say, I'm getting the feeling that you might not think I'm the most qualified candidate. What is it that you're looking for that I might not have? Or what is the best thing that you like about my resume? Why did you bring me in here today? But to take the moment away from the anxiety you would naturally feel because you want the job, and to take it away from the anxiety you feel because you feel your sales pitch is not working, and to bring it instead into the human mode of conversation between a person who has a need for someone to do a job and a person who is ready to do a job, and to say, how do you bring that conversation together? And John, you asked, how do we prepare for an interview? I mean, I think we're always preparing to talk to other people about their needs. And this is a moment when you can be a good, active listener and sort of take a pause and change the direction or the tone of the conversation if it's getting intense or it's getting abstract or it's getting to where you think they're drifting away. How can you very patiently and calmly through dialogue bring it back? Because what I find is that often when people were interviewing and they felt that they were not getting it, they would then begin to talk and talk and talk more and more and more, and they would try and plug all the holes, and they would try and list everything they could that they thought would make them qualified, and they would just say all this stuff. And what I was really looking for as a recruiter in that moment is, are you present? Are we connecting? Can you be here with me, talking about what this job is? And I know that's a little bit fuzzy, but I think that, a lot of times when people don't do well in those interview situations, it's not about what's on their resume. It's not even about what their skills are. It's that they're not a good listener, they're not reading the cues, and they're not having a dialogue with me.
Got it. That's good. That's great. So to begin wrapping this up, Justin, you're in that same interview. How do you know when you're done? How do you know when this isn't going anywhere and it's time to fold your tent and go home?
Well, I mean, that's where I just, again, I think so much of the advice of this panel has been towards honesty, right? Don't lie on your resume. Don't embellish too much. In the same thing, if you begin to feel that your goose is cooked, you're not going to get this job, then your risk threshold might rise, right? If you already think you're not communicating well and you're not getting along, then you can go ahead and maybe just say, what do you feel right now, recruiter, about how we're getting along? What do you think my chances are of getting along in this organization? Because you can now cut to the chase. I mean, I remember as a recruiter, if we brought in a candidate, sometimes they would have 6 interviews lined up, and I would be the first one. And if the person was willing to cut to the chase and say, you know what, I actually think I'm not a culture fit here, or I think that I'm looking for something that you're not looking for, everybody's happy that we have cut to the chase there. Because yes, it's good for them to have practice interviewing, but the company is busy and it doesn't want to necessarily have 6 people sit down with someone who's not serious about pursuing an opportunity there. So I think there's an opportunity for radical honesty there that could serve you. I mean, because what I find with a lot of the companies that I've worked with is we just wanted people who are in the moment, ready to get stuff done, on our wavelength. And if you can prove that you're not in a sort of formal, decorous process of everybody reading through all the points on their bullet list, but rather that people are talking directly to each other about the work that needs to get done, then you can show yourself as that kind of person by putting all your cards on the table when you think it might be time to fold.
Great. John, what do you do when it's time to fold?
Well, again, I guess it depends on the scenario, right? I mean, there's so many different possible situations there. I mean, I really like what Justin said about the listening. I mean, if for whatever reason you feel like this isn't going well, but yet passionately that you are still a great candidate and a great fit for this organization, well, that's one road to go down, right? And again, you've got to pause and reflect and take a different tactic here. If it's a situation though, it's not going well because you're just really not a good match for this position. I think then it might be, but yeah, you still want to work for that company. Now, see, that may be a time to backtrack and talk about, and again, be honest. It sounds like I'm really not a good fit for this particular position. However, based on everything I've read and heard, I'm a good fit for this organization. Let's talk about other opportunities. If you've done your research on this company, and especially nowadays, I mean, so many companies are doing a lot of hiring. This more than likely isn't the only position that's out there, right? So again, through better questioning, and again, as Justin said, better listening, maybe you uncover other opportunities that hadn't even been discussed. So don't throw in the towel completely just because maybe this position isn't, particularly the right match.
Got it. That's great. Don, what do you think? How do you know when it's time to throw in the towel?
I think it, was, again, kind of what Justin said already, the radical honesty. That might not be a bad path to go down, really, because you could say, listen, it's pretty clear from our discussion, this job's over my head, and I want to be respectful of your time. And obviously, I don't think this is a good fit at this point, but I'm really interested in this company. And I feel, and then you can make your pitch there about how you would fit in the company and other roles. And if you've done your research, again, referencing some of those other opportunities, I think you're going to win friends on the recruiter side because you're not taking up their time once you've had that realization. I think one thing that's a good, and I wanted to mention it earlier too, is to actually have the heat check question towards the end of the interview and ask them outright as the candidate, say, listen, based on our discussion today, do you have any concerns about my ability to do the job? And that will give you that instant feedback about where you are in the process. And then that may or may not confirm whether your goose is cooked on the recruiter side, whether they've already ruled you out, or it might be that you just simply didn't pick up on something that you should have talked about in their previous cues that they were giving you. So again, that's a listening opportunity as well.
Okay, so I'm going to pick up on that a little bit and run this back by everybody. Well, one of the characteristics of being a job hunter is it's a high anxiety state. And in high anxiety states, it's really hard to understand whether your assessment of the situation is a solid assessment of the situation. And while I get the heat check question at the end of the interview, sort of in the middle of the interview, when you think you know what's going on, what is it? What are some of the things that you do to make sure that your perception of what's going on is solid? And I think it would be nice if everybody was good at interviewing for jobs and this was a regular thing. But as I understand it, nobody wants to be good at interviewing for jobs. And so this is going to be a problem for everybody. What do you think, Don?
I think a good question you might ask in midway in the interview is to ask for confirmation. Basically, you could say something along the lines, based on what am I understanding you correctly that da 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 da, or am I to understand that what you're looking for is X? So you're asking for that confirmation. That way you're allowing yourself to be corrected if you're not understanding it, and the person who's interviewing you can give you feedback on, oh, no, you're not understanding that correctly, and then you have an opportunity to revise how you've addressed that in the past. So, asking for some kind of confirmation at some point, there's nothing wrong with that.
And throw stuff across the room. So, John, what do you do to temper the internal anxiety and make sure that you understand what's going on in the room in an interview?
Well, I mean, it may seem like overly basic advice, but to your point, people aren't necessarily professional interviewers. So certainly with that in mind, just make sure that people take notes during the interview, and take time to pause and reflect on those notes. As Dawn said, you go down a certain line of questioning or a certain discussion in the interview, and it's okay to pause a little bit and when you're looking at your notes and going over a couple of things, that shows that interviewer, for one, you're listening, right? You're actually recording some of these thoughts, right? And then that you're able to kind of articulate that back to that interviewer. It's very impressive on an interview. There's nothing worse than conducting an interview and the person's just staring at you. And even if they're coming up with good answers or whatever, they're not taking notes. They don't seem like they're really engaged in that conversation. So I don't want to, understate the importance of note taking.
Got it. That's great advice. Justin, what do you think?
Well, I think this is all great advice. I think that to build a little bit on what Dawn said, there were times as a recruiter when people would share their anxiety. They wouldn't hide it. They would say, I'm really nervous. I really want to work. I think this is a great company. How am I doing? They would share with me the stakes. And I think, the recruiter is definitely working for the company and not for the candidate, but the recruiter is also the gatekeeper. So I think there's a way in which the recruiter can, depending on the person, can be a sort of a trusted intermediary in a way for your experience as a candidate. I mean, as a recruiter, I took seriously my job as I was in charge of candidate experience. Did my candidates have a good experience? And so I was open to candidates who were willing to be vulnerable with me. And I felt like that vulnerability helped establish a little bit of the human connection, because at the end of the day, it's humans who want to work with other humans, and there's a lot of vulnerability in that. And I respected people who were, they weren't necessarily gushing or sort of going overboard, but they were basically saying, look, I'm nervous and I'm not sure I'm doing good because I want this a lot and it's making me kind of tense. Is this okay? And that was an opportunity for me as a recruiter, because recruiter was part of HR, human relations. I was, I wanted people to get along. I think a lot of people who work in these jobs, they want people to get along. So I would encourage you, if you are having a moment in the midst of an interview where you're like, am I connecting? Is this person hearing what I'm saying? Is this working out? Are they coming to understand me? That you might be able to be vulnerable. And hopefully if the person across the table from you, the recruiter or the person inside the company has, been sharing social cues with you, you'll understand that you can have a human connection there. And that can make you feel comfortable and understand whether you're moving in the right direction in the way you're talking and the things you're talking about.
So let's wrap this all the way up then. I'm going to ask each of you to reintroduce yourselves, give whatever contact information you care to give, and give us one sentence that you hope people will take away from this conversation. Let's start with John.
John Estes, Robert Half, Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm on LinkedIn. You can easily access me on social media. And the best advice I give to job seekers is be prepared. Solid resume, homework on the company, knowledge is power. This whole idea of talking about being nervous, that's the best thing to avoid being nervous. Just do your homework and be prepared.
Thanks. Justin?
Yeah, so hi, my name is Justin Hall, and I've worked for many years for a great company called DNA, which is a mobile phone games company. And after being a recruiter there for a while, I decided to head out on my own. And what I really wanted to do was to produce videos. So I now produce videos from my home. If you look for the Justin Hall Show on YouTube, you can see the work that I do. And I know that I want to work again someday. I may want to have a job. But what I love about what I do now is that every day I can wake up and I can just work. I don't have to ask permission from someone to work, which is what a job is. It's sort of a permission and an opportunity to work. So I would encourage people who are really stuck in a long-term job search and are feeling very frustrated, I would hope that you can find something to work on that will activate your sense of empowerment and will activate your sense of productivity and will bring you in contact with other people in your community who may see the ways in which you can work and the great things you can make.
Thanks, Justin. And Don, why don't you wrap it up?
Okay, Dawn Rasmussen, Pathfinder Writing and Career Services, pathfindercareers.com, and I'm on LinkedIn as well. And I'd say the main thing that I hope people take away is to know your value. And the more you understand what you're capable of doing and what you can do and how you might help employers, that will definitely translate when you start talking to them in interviews and communicating your value to them.
Thanks very much. And I'm John Sumser. You can find me at hrexaminer.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at John Sumser. And with that, I want to thank you three. This has been a delightful conversation. I think it was value-packed, and anybody who watches this will get a good return on their time. So I'm turning it back to you, Mark.
Thanks very much, John. I want to thank everyone on the panel. Again, John Sumser, John Rasmussen, Justin Hall, and John Estes. If anybody out there has questions, just email them to editor@dice.com and we'll get answers back to you. Again, to the panel, thank you, and thanks to everyone out there who's watching. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.
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 Bye-bye.